This is a short little video about a problem set that looks at opportunity costs in trade and also looks at how economic growth can affect changes in opportunity costs and also affect the flow of trade and actually spread the wealth from one country to another country. So there's an awful lot of ideas that are built up in this problem set. Now this problem set looks at two countries, England, Portugal, cloth and wine. And this problem set is sort of a special homage to David Ricardo, the British economist who first developed this idea of comparative advantage and how it's the root of trade, and also developed an economic model to explain it. In some ways, David Ricardo is sort of the first, you could say, modern economist in his use of economic modeling based in mathematics to show what was going on in the world. So let's take a look at this situation here. We have two countries, England and Portugal. Both of them produce cloth and wine, just like Ricardo said. And in this situation, if England spent all of its time making cloth, it would have 8 yards of cloth. If it spent all of its time making wine, it would have 2 barrels of wine. Portugal, if it spent its time making cloth, would have 12 yards of cloth, and or it could have 6 barrels of wine if it spent all of its time doing that. So clearly, Portugal is better than England at producing both goods. In this situation, even though Portugal is better, they're better off trading with England. And let's kind of take a look at that. If we were to consider a situation where they couldn't trade, England and Portugal both had to produce their own wine and their own cloth. They spent their time 50-50 doing each. How would they turn out? Well, if they couldn't specialize in trade, what they should do is, right, England would spend half of its time making cloth, half its time making barrels of wine. At the end of the day, they would have, right, 4 yards of cloth and 1 barrel of wine. Portugal would have 6 yards of cloth and 3 barrels of wine. Collectively, their world would have 10 yards of cloth and 4 barrels of wine. Okay, that's pretty good. Suppose they were to specialize in the production of one thing. Well, what should they specialize in? Well, the key idea of specialization is that you should specialize in the thing that you are better at, the thing that you have the lower opportunity cost at. So let's think about what their opportunity cost would be. Let's put everything in terms of barrels of wine. For England, 1 barrel of wine equals 4 yards of cloth. For Portugal, 1 barrel of wine is equal to 2 barrels of cloth. 2 barrels of wine. That needs to be a yard. 1 yard of, 1 barrel of wine is equal to 2 yards of cloth. In this situation, when England chooses to make a barrel of wine, they give up a lot of cloth. When Portugal chooses to make a barrel of wine, they give up less cloth. So it's better for Portugal to be making the wine, and it is better for England to be making the cloth. Let me erase this for right now. And in this situation, if they were to focus on trade, at the end of the time, they would have, as collectively a world, because England specializes in cloth, they would have 8 yards of cloth, and they would have 6 barrels of wine. They give up a little bit of cloth compared to what they would do when they had to split their time. They're down 2 yards of cloth, but they're up 2 barrels of wine. Barrels of wine seem to be more productive, worth more than Cloth, so that we could say that specialization is a wealthier world. There is the opportunity to gain from trade. A wealthier world means that both sides can benefit. So let's talk about how trade would develop here. Well, let's go back to their opportunity cost. England had an opportunity cost, if you remember, of 1 barrel of wine to 4 yards of cloth. Portugal had an opportunity cost of 1 barrel of wine to 2 yards of cloth. There's a difference in their opportunity costs, right? There are a number of different combinations between these two rates of exchange. Suppose we were to go somewhere in the middle. 1 barrel for 3 yards of cloth. At this rate of exchange, both Portugal and England can be made better off. Trade is beneficial to them. Okay? An exchange rate in between is good for both of them. Suppose the exchange rate was 1 barrel for 5 yards of cloth. Well, this exchange rate, 1 barrel to 5 yards of cloth, is beyond England's opportunity cost. This would be a terrible deal for England. England would never agree to that. So, in order for having a trade agreement actually work between the two, it has to be at an exchange rate that is between the two sides.